only got a couple more minutes. The white man can never win another war on the ground. His days of war victory, his days of ground victory are over. Can I prove it? Yes. Take all the action that's going on this earth right now that he's involved in. Tell me where he's winning. Nowhere. Why, some rice farmers, some rice eaters ran him out of Korea. Yes, they ran him out of Korea. Rice eaters with nothing but gym shoes and a rifle and a bowl of rice. Took him and his tanks and his napalm and all that other action he's supposed to have and ran him across the Yalu. Why? Because the day that he can win on the ground is past. Up in French Indochina, those little peasants, rice growers, took on the might of the French army and ran all the Frenchmen. You remember Dien Bien Phu? No. The same thing happened in Algeria, in Africa. They didn't have anything but a rifle. The French had all these highly mechanized instruments of warfare. But they put some guerrilla action on. And a white man can't fight a guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla action takes heart, takes nerve, and he doesn't have that. He's brave when he's got tanks. He's brave when he's got planes. He's brave when he's got bombs. He's brave when he got a whole lot of company along with him. But you take that little man from Africa and Asia, turn him loose in the woods with a blade. That's all he needs. All he needs is a blade. And when the sun comes down, goes down, and it's dark, it's even Steven.
Set the tone, delivering that fire for this topic on war today, war tomorrow, war is peace on my learning channel here on YouTube. So that was Malcolm, 1964, the Ballad or the Bullet speech. Just a wealth of knowledge that we can learn and understand the psychology of history. I mean, I looked at Malcolm was like a master psychologist, even though he didn't have a degree in psychology. First time I heard him mention Dien Bien Phu, I was unfamiliar with that. I did not know the historical record, of Vietnam. 10 years before he gave that speech in 1954 is when the French, who were supported by the USA and CIA, they got their butts beat by the Viet Minh, who were supported by Russia and China. So now we're dealing with the politics of what's going on with geopolitics, with war and who's supporting who. So with Malcolm, I look at his words are still manifesting today. And that's why in this book, The Dead Are Rising. The Dead Are Arising. The Life of Malcolm X by Les Payne and Tamara Payne. So we're talking about his words still emanating and rising today. Haven't read this thoroughly, and there's not much here about, Vietnam in this book. But it's talking about, again, his life and times and how he made his moves. So we know, I was really tripping off of how he talked about people with gym shoes, a rifle, and a bowl of rice. Rice. We're going to come back to that rice. The gym shoes, a rifle, and a bowl of rice. Kick the white man's butt. So that was hilarious truth, to the matter. But to me, that was an excellent display you saw on that video. You can go on YouTube and check out Malcolm, but that was from a website by Napatu, Napatou. So much respect to them for putting out the words of Malcolm and having the display of the images behind that. So using that to set the tone for our discussion on war today. War tomorrow, war is peace. So when I returned from Vietnam in December 2023, I saw nothing but peace. The people, the place, the environment, just beautiful people. You just think about those were the people that were being attacked during the Vietnam War. I mean, peaceful people. The landscape was flush, beautiful plants, coconuts, bananas, you name it, you got it there. And you see what happened when the in the war, when the powers that be sprayed that Agent Orange and try to defoliate the grass and the trees and the landscape. I mean, just destroyed all that natural environment. Just sad. Even the water supply being destroyed. So I don't study war, and I've never been enamored with the Vietnam War. So for me, this is kind of new. You can look at books, you can read things. Like here's a book right here, A Bright Shining Lie by John Paul Van. Was by about John Paul Van, an American in Vietnam, written by Neil Sheehan. I only mention this because it's a real thick book. Not one image of a black person in here. This book was written like 1988. But it says bright shining lie. But what's the lie? Because I told you before about the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Read that in Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the United States. Talk about that Gulf of Tonkin, how we got involved in the Vietnam War. It says right here, page 466. Howard Zinn talks about war as a permanent part of the economy here in the United States. That's why we're always continually going to war. In early August 1964, President Johnson used a murky set of events in the Gulf of Tonkin, that's off the north coast of Vietnam, to launch full-scale war on Vietnam. Johnson and Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara told the American public there was an attack by North Vietnamese torpedo boats on American destroyers. While on routine patrol in international waters, McNamara said the U.S. destroyer Maddox underwent an unprovoked attack. It later turned out that the Gulf of Tonkin episode was a fake, that the highest American officials had lied to the public, just as they had in the invasion of Cuba under Kennedy. In fact, the CIA had engaged in a secret operation attacking North Vietnamese coastal installations. So if there were or there had been an attack, it would not have been unprovoked. So this whole manipulation of history and it's not knowing what happened. So that book I just showed you by Sheehan, you got another book by Wallace Terry called Bloods, an oral history of Black Vietnam veterans, oral history of the Vietnam War by Black veterans. Nothing about the Gulf of Tonkin in here either, because it didn't come out till years later. So get a chance to read Bloods, and also you watch a movie by Spike Lee called The Five Bloods, VA5 Bloods, about the Black brothers going through the experience of Vietnam, because it was totally different from how the white people had kind of portrayed their perspective in Vietnam. May his soul rest in peace. But there's an author named John Pilger. He just passed away last month, December 30th, 2023. Powerful Australian journalist, New Rulers of the World. I'll go over his information a little bit later when I talk about the Palestinian situation, Israel and Gaza, because he was a critic of American, Australian, and British foreign policy, which he considered to be driven by an imperialist and colonialist agenda. He criticized his native country's treatment of indigenous Australians. He first drew international attention for his reports on the Cambodian genocide. Cambodia right there near Vietnam, Thailand, all that area where they were in South Asia, decimating the people. So Pilger's career as a documentary filmmaker began with The Quiet Mutiny in 1970, made during one of his visits to Vietnam, and continued with over 50 other documentaries. I mean, he's prolific, 50. So that Quiet Mutiny movie, that's where Good Morning Vietnam came from, when Robert Williams did that movie, Good Morning Vietnam. So it's really focused on the Quiet Mutiny by John Pilger. So after I had watched both that little documentary and watched the movie Good Morning Vietnam, I had a different perspective. I was there in Vietnam. So now to see movies are playing about it and seeing how beautiful the people are and how the environment was just conducive to peace, even though right now it's a socialist, no, excuse me, it's a communist government, a socialist republic, the communist party that runs the government. I saw no poverty. I saw no drama, murders. I saw no accidents. I mean, so people talking about communism bad, socialism bad. Came back to America from the visit, saw nothing but mass murders and accidents and killings and blah, blah, blah. You don't see that when you go abroad. So for understanding that this whole reality with war, the masses are controlled and there's a few asses that are controlling the capitalistic enterprise, manipulating what we know. You know what? Remember 1984 by George Orwell? Let me get that book. Yeah, by George Orwell. 1984. Perhaps you read it, but there's some key words in there or slogans. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. Sound like a bunch of oxymorons, but how can war be peace? Because those who are creating it are winning on both sides of the war in terms of getting money for the enterprise and manipulating people, and it's about control and domination. And it's the little people who are killing one another and dying. And when we look at the Vietnam War, it really was a situation where you had people just in a position where they were being manipulated and controlled. And guess what? It might have came down to something called rice. I got a book by Sam Yet called The Choice. The Issue of Black Survival in America. Sam Yet is a journalist, black journalist. He's now deceased. But I'm going to read a passage to you about what he's saying was the driving factor. Because why were we over there? About communism, other side of the world. I mean, if you look at the map, break this down, we look at a map, it's way over here. Vietnam, way over here. America is way on the other side of the world, over here. Almost took me 28 hours to fly there. So I don't know how the military in the past was flying there back and forth, but that's a long way away. And we're over there fighting communism. Let the people live like they want to live. So the North and the South were kind of split. And that's how it is also Korea. The North and the South kind of split. The United States, the North and the South were split. So there in Vietnam, Northern Vietnam, they pretty much today, if you read and look at the staple and what they eat, because when I was there, the rice didn't taste that great. When I say rice, I mean the food items. It says, rice is the mainstay diet. It is grown throughout the country, but particularly in the Red River Delta in the north. It says, white rice is a staple of the southern Vietnamese diet. North has a preference for noodles. Now this is intriguing because Brother Yet says that rice was the reason that Vietnam War was going on. Who's going to control the rice? Yet says in a prelude to explaining that in late 1969, for example, when a group of black people who called themselves Muslims bought cattle and land in St. Clair County, Alabama, and attempted to produce their own food, colonial insanity broke out. In a page 1 banner story, the December 2nd, 1969 edition of the Washington Afro-American reported, a group of angry white St. Clair County residents, estimated 2,200 or more, met in a local school last Friday night to decide what action should be taken to regain land legally sold to the Chicago black Muslims. This is no different than Tulsa riots, Black Wall Street, and all the things that they've done to Wilmington riots to get rid of black people who are doing and being progressive. So on an international scene, these things are happening. In 1965, the year President Kennedy had secretly planned to complete the pullout from Vietnam, his successor, President Johnson, a Texan, secretly began a massive buildup of U.S. troops and munitions there. Now, you know Kennedy was killed. He wasn't just killed just because he was being killed. He was killed because, again, he was changing the dynamics of how this war machine was going. This buildup was in direct contradiction of President Johnson's campaign pledges, accompanied by tactical defoliation of Vietnam jungles and rice paddies. In that same period, U.S. rice growers tripled their production. Let me repeat that again. They wanted to tactically defoliate the Vietnamese rice paddies, and during that time period, U.S. rice growers tripled their production from 1960 volume. And the United States have replaced Thailand is the world's #1 exporter. In less than a decade, the world's biggest rice growing community of nations had reverted from a rice surplus area to an area of severe dependency, buying rice from one of the world's smallest producers, the United States of America. Rice. Who's going to control the rice production? There's no other reason why we're over there. And so the Vietnamese tried to go to the Thailand to try to do some things. Meanwhile, in the government, you got all these things happening with these congressional hearings about what's really happening over there, about who's going to make the money. All this is going on behind the scenes. So Brother Yet breaks this down in his book, The Choice. These are things we don't pay attention to behind the scenes about why war really happens. And again, Kennedy was killed because of this. So when we get to this rice story, I happen to have this Health magazine article I clipped. It says why brown rice is better. Rice is generally thought to be part of a healthy diet because it's a good source of fiber, but not all rice is equally nutritious. And as I told you, when I was in Vietnam, I didn't feel like that rice was quality rice. Places I had gone to, they love noodles and other things, but made me question this. Brown rice might have an advantage over white rice by offering protection from high blood pressure and atherosclerosis, that is hardening of the arteries, say researchers at Cardiovascular Research Center and Department of Physiology at Temple University School of Medicine in Philadelphia. The secret lies in the layer between the white center of the grain and the brown fibrous outer layer, which is milled away to protect white rice. Now listen to this. It contains a component that works against angiotensin II, a known culprit in development of these health problems. I might have gone over your head there, but the coronavirus gets into your system by the angiotensin converting enzyme. Basically the same thing that's right here, angiotensin II, the ACE2 inhibitor. When you hear about that ACE2, that's how it's getting into, that's coronavirus is slipping into your system. So they created this so-called vaccine, this jab, to create a way to kind of make that, alter that, the spike protein that's allowing that virus to get into that area. But it's the angiotensin converting enzyme receptor that's doing that. But here you have rice connected to susceptibility to poor health. Just thought that was interesting to bring up, but rice is probably one of the reasons why there's some manipulations of this world history rather than just saying communism. So let's put that in perspective. So this really brings up the what happens with the Cold War in terms of weapons. You know, after World War II and the Nagasaki and the atomic bomb, and then you got this Vietnam War. Everybody's trying to build up weapons. There's a woman named Dr. Heldon Caldecott from Australia wrote a book called Missile Envy, like we think about penis envy in psychology. The Arms Race and Nuclear War, 1986 edition here, but she's explaining how this whole buildup of weapons is a male thing, the arms race, the terminal event, germs of conflict, the third world, how long will the earth survive? So she's been a fantastic promoter of denuclearizing the world, like anti-nuclear weapons. So Helen Caldecott, probably won't find this book anywhere, but she's written this book called Missile Envy. You can hear her lectures actually maybe on YouTube. So we'll now move to Russia, because now we're talking about Russia being the other side of the world that created this Cold War. They got missiles, we got missiles. I say we, of the United States. Talking about them, European powers over there in Russia. So you're talking about really white people having a stranglehold on the world with nuclear weapons. Nobody's going to win. So Malcolm was saying in the Battle of the Bullet, nobody can win a nuclear war because one blows theirs and the other's going to blow theirs and the whole world's gone. It's ridiculous. But the issue is about power. If you've ever read Machiavelli, The Prince, talks about, do you want to be feared or you want to be loved? And so this whole missile envy or generating weapons is about power. Listen to this. Here is a question that arises, whether it is better to be loved than feared or the reverse. The answer is, of course, that it would be best to be both loved and feared, but since the two rarely come together, anyone compelled to choose will find greater security in being feared than in being loved. I wonder if this has anything to do with American politics. People fearing this one particular orange man, and now he must be the one we should be looking for. For this can be said about the generality of men, that they are ungrateful, fickle, dissembling, anxious to flee danger, and covetous of gain. Sounds like anybody who's supporting the orange man right now. So long as you promote their advantage, they are all yours. As I said before, and will offer you their blood, their goods, their lives, and their children when the need for these is remote. When the need arises, however, they will turn against you. The prince who bases his security upon the word, lacking other provision, is doomed, for friendships that are gained by money, not by greatness and nobility of spirit, may well be earned but cannot be kept, and in time of need they will have fled your purse. Men are less concerned about offending someone they have cause to love than someone they have cause to fear. Love endures by a bond which men, being scoundrels, may break whenever it serves their advantage to do so. But fear is supported by the dread of pain, which is ever present. So he wrote The Prince discussing this power dynamic. Also wrote The Art of War, and also I let someone borrow my book by Sun Tzu called The Art of War. That's a pretty impressive book, talking about how the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Got to start breaking things down and understanding that not everybody's enemy is your enemy. It says that's well, we'll move to discussing a little bit about Russia, and then also talk about Palestine, because Russia and Ukraine will end on that, and then Palestine and Israel will end on that. Okay. So when I say Russia, one of the most interesting books on my bookshelf I have is by Vladimir Alexandrov. It's called The Black Russian. What could that possibly be about? It's about this brother from Mississippi, man, who went to Russia, not just Russia, went to Europe, and was running the show with nightclubs. Mater D, he just grew and built. He's like a millionaire. This is old school stuff. I mean, it's back in like 1800s. What? The Black Russian. So this guy named Frederick Thomas. Frederick Bruce Thomas. Man, I'm just reading this story coming from Mississippi, where things weren't going too well in Mississippi back in the day in the South. So he saw his father get murdered. Same thing you think about with Malcolm. Saw his father get murdered. So he was traveling throughout the world and left. See a little map in here. He left Mississippi, went north to Chicago, went north to Chicago, then Chicago to New York, and left New York, went over to London, Paris, and went all through Europe, basically making money. Now, he doesn't speak French. He didn't speak German. He didn't speak Russian. He didn't speak any of those languages. And ended up being right there near Ukraine, where we have the drama going on between Russia and Ukraine today. So this brother, I mean, just fascinating that he was able to carry his life out during a time period, like I said, 1800s. He's born 1872, and he was over there living, loving life. Had two different families, children. Children certainly suffered from all the, I guess the distance that was going on with him moving around. And then I just was amazed that he wasn't really ostracized as a black person living in that environment. Wasn't, racism may have been happening, but he was able to flourish during a time period where you would not think so. So Russia wasn't like a bad place. Even today, when you think about Russia, Russia has a Patrice Lumumba Institute. No, Patrice Lumumba University. Russia has a mountain named after Paul Robeson. So Russia is not an enemy to black people. So we have to start looking at independence movements. Russia gave weapons to some of the African countries that were fighting against colonial empires like France and Belgium and in England. So Russia's not an enemy. So Walter Rodney wrote a book called The Russian Revolution. So actually, this book was put together posthumously, after he passed. His daughter and wife, as Asha and Pat Rodney, helped put together this book, along with Robin D. G. Kelly and Jesse Benjamin. They looked at the archives, looked at his notes, that lectures that he'd given at the University of Dar es Salaam there in Tanzania, and he was talking about the Russian Revolution and its impact on the colonial legacy. So definitely a good book to read, but it's describing again how Russia was not really the enemy of African people. They were providing resources and sustenance. So I'm just saying it's really a problem today when we see with the Ukrainian situation. I mean, why did it happen? We might not find out 10 years later about what was really going on. But you have drama in the sports world. Like the sports people are creating these wars. Where you got some of Ukrainian people, players that have families been decimated, killed, and starving, and being attacked, and so the Russians are doing that against the Ukrainians. So now in sports, you have a lot of white women saying that they won't shake the hands of people who are from Russia or from Belarus, a place that's north of Ukraine but connected to Russia. And speaking, the white woman tennis players are saying that those players should be speaking out more, or since their families are dying there in Ukraine, they don't want to deal with those players. I'm like, well, don't play. So disrespectful to not want to play a match and then not want to shake somebody's hands afterwards. You playing for 3 hours and don't want to shake the hands afterwards. There's no real controversy going on about them complaining. Compare that to one black man that complained about the killings and police brutality that's going on in the United States, and how he was whiteballed and not being able to play in the NFL and still can't play just because he stood up, just like these white women are standing up by not shaking the hands of their opponents. He's just taking a knee, saying, look, we got to address these brutality issues going on against my people who look like me. And he's now being vilified. But the white women aren't being vilified. I'm just saying how you put politics into sports, it's really problematic. And how you just deal with the issue of foreigners in your community. The last book I'll just talk about here as we conclude is Driven Out: The Forgotten War Against Chinese Americans. Gene Fauser, Jewish writer. Just thought it was interesting because people don't know that a lot of Chinese were kicked out of places like Tacoma, Washington. Oh, you got white people that did whatever they could to drive those Chinese people out of the West. So after the West was trying to get the gold rush and trying to be capital gain capital from all the resources there. And now people are coming there, and the Chinese built the railroads, and Chinese are there, and they keep coming because they're coming from the Pacific, coming from, the boats coming over from the Pacific. Well, there got to be too many. White people were fearing that, but they drove those Chinese people out. And this book details the horrors that happened to the Chinese people that were out there in the California, Oregon region. Some of them don't even want to go back to that area in that region because of what was done to them. But the history is there. So the last area we'll talk about today with, I want to say war today, war tomorrow, war is peace, is the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which has been a problem for years. But in John Pilger's book, as I said, I can honor him today because he just passed away last month. But he had been a fighter for the oppressed groups like the Palestinians for years. But listen to the passages he has written about. And he wrote this back in 2002. We're now 20 years beyond that. On no other subject are the boundaries of objective reporting more finely drawn than Israel. For 35 years, at least, Palestinians have been denied a right of return to their homes in breach of numerous United Nations resolutions and international law. In demanding Israel's withdrawal from the West Bank and Gaza, how long are we going to keep dealing with this? This is 20 years ago. We're talking the same things today. As I said, war today, war tomorrow, war is peace. The Security Council used words strikingly similar to those that demanded Iraq's withdrawal from Kuwait in 1990. And that was a joke because Saddam Hussein went to the American powers that be and said, I'm tired of the slant drilling of Kuwait onto our land. What do you think about it? Americans said nothing. Check the record. Abel Gillespie, these people in government, they said, oh, don't worry about it. As soon as the Iraqis went in, the Americans used it as a pretext to say we're going to war. When Iraq did not comply, it was attacked by an American-led coalition and Kuwait was liberated, whatever that means. When Israel has not complied, it has received increased Western, principally American, economic and military support. Now, the support is what is the problem that we see today with people complaining. With honorable exceptions, events in Palestine are reported in the West in terms of warring rivals, not as the oppression of an illegal occupier and the resistance of the occupied. The Israeli regime continues to set the international news agenda. Israelis are murdered by terrorists, while Palestinians are left dead after a clash with security forces. Again, journalism and manipulating the story. Distinction is rarely made between a huge nuclear-armed military force with tanks, fighter jets, and helicopter gunships, and crowds of youth with slingshots. Like the slingshots are going to beat a bomber. Now, you know England was involved in this also. Under Blair, that is Tony Blair, British support for Israel repression has accelerated. During 2001, with 650 Palestinians killed by the Israelis, mostly civilians and many of them assassinations, the government approved 91 arms export licenses to Israel in categories that included ammunition, bombs, torpedoes, rockets, missiles, combat vessels, military electronic equipment, and armored vehicles. Now, I'm reading this to you because this is old history. This is 2024, and we're seeing current history. The storyline has not changed. Blair's support for Sharon, that is in Israel, regime goes even deeper. In May and July 2001, The authoritative Jane's Foreign Report disclosed that Britain and France had given the green light to Sharon to attack Arafat if the Palestinian resistance did not stop. The British government was shown a plan for an all-out Israeli invasion and reoccupation of the West Bank and Gaza, using the latest F-16 and F-15 jets against all the main installations of the Palestinian Authority. So I reiterate, this is now 23 years ago. However, the Israeli plan needed a suicide bomb blast, which causes numerous deaths and injuries. Remember what happened in October 7th? They said that the Hamas attacked Israel. The revenge factor is crucial. This is now written in 2001. 2000, what did I say? 2002, this book is written. This happened 2001. The revenge factor is crucial. It would motivate Israeli soldiers to demolish Palestinians. So we see what has happened 23 years later. They use this now to decimate the whole Gaza Strip. On November 23rd, 2001, Israeli agents assassinated the Hamas leader, Muhammad Abu Hamad. 12 days later, the inevitable response came. 12 days later, the inevitable response came in coordinated suicide attacks against Israel. Whoever decided upon the liquidation of Abu Hamad knew in advance that would be the price to pay. 23 years ago, and we are dealing with the same scenario today, even worse. So in conclusion, yes, war today, war tomorrow. War is only peace for those trying to control the world. Do what you can to fight against that, and know that war is not the answer. Thanks for walking along with me in peace. See you next time.